Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. My name is Jessica Flake. I'm back with Pastor Pete this week.
It's been a while.
It has been.
Excited to podcast together again.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks, so excited.
Absolutely.
So, right, was this the second week? No,
Third week.
Third week. I missed a few weeks. I was on vacation and...
Yeah, third week of our series, Marvels. We're looking at 7 miracles that are recorded in the Gospel of John, and they're referred to as signs. And one of the things we've been reading from Gary Burge, who's a theologian, he talks about how these signs are not about the power themselves, the miracles themselves, but instead about the questions that they raise for us. And so it's been a really fun series so far for me. I love teaching from narratives and exploring stories that I have felt my whole life are familiar. And then I, kind of unpeel the different layers and opens up a whole new kind of way of reading those passages. So it's been a lot of fun. I hope it's been good for y'all as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting just to see the different takes of the miracles and the understanding of like the first miracle of the turning the water into wine at the wedding, and understanding why it happened the way it did. So it's very cool to dive deeper into what the miracles were about.
Well, and too, as you realize too, it's like you're just scratching the surface,
right?
Like all of these are like they produce so many questions in us, and so much like, hey, can I explore this? And it's one of the things I like to think about is that if we as finite people are worshiping and believe that God is a God of wisdom beyond our understanding, then every time we open up his infinite wisdom, we can see something new and we can learn more. And so, each week it's been like picking the 2 questions that stick out most to me. And there are a dozen others that I'm like, but why is this? Why is that? So but this week we're in our third miracle. It comes here right on the tails of the last miracle. So we just finished up in chapter 4, and now we go into chapter 5, and we see another miracle of Jesus. Yeah. So let's go ahead and read through. But this time, let's just pause as we're reading. Okay. Ask questions. We can. You can pause and ask a question. I can interject and ask a question. We can go from there.
Yeah. So this one, when I was reading it, actually brought up some questions. So I'm glad we're doing it this way.
Awesome.
All right. So sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. In which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him laying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked, "Do you want to get well?" Okay, so my first question.
Yeah.
So why did people go to this pool?
Yeah.
Like, what was it about? Why did they think this pool was healing?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of it's just conjecture, right? That ideas, and we don't know exactly what's happening. One thing that's really interesting, you'll see in your Bible that we skip from verse 3 to verse 5. There is no verse 4. Well, that's because verse 4 was a clarification that was made by later biblical translators.
That's what mine says, 4 in parentheses.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so later translators had put in a line that said, because they believed that the waters were stirred by an angel and the first that would enter the water would be healed, right? There was this belief that there was something supernatural that was taking place there. Now, we now know that the pool is bubbling because there were, it was fed by a live spring, right? And there's, geological movement that happens under the surface of Earth that changes the currents and creates these bubbles in the water from time to time. And you'll see that in other bodies of water as well. But there's also still the question remains that says, okay, well, all these people gathered there, they probably gathered there for a reason, right? And so what was it? And again, I don't know the answer there. I think there are demonstrations throughout the ancient world, but also throughout even our modern context where we see the supernatural take place and things that happen that we can't explain. Perhaps there's something that is happening there where there's some sort of spiritual happenings that are happening in this water. The other side is perhaps there's a placebo effect that happens too, where the water bubbles and they get in and for whatever reason that has freed them of the thing that was holding them back or keeping them from, and we see that in modern medicine, right? That placebo medicines can have an impact in a very real way on people's livelihoods and realities. The other thing that we also recognize is, as this man says, I've been laying here for 38 years, and so I've never been able to get to the pool. Well, so the people apparently that are able to get to the pool are those that maybe have less traumatic injuries and sicknesses. And so again, maybe that lends to that placebo piece. But the important part to recognize is that culturally, it was a place that was seen as a place of healing. Whether or not that was placebo, whether or not there was something supernatural happening there, it was believed to be, by that community and that culture, a place where healing happened. So people that needed healing gathered there. It's interesting. So what do you notice about right here, just in the first 7 verses, about Jesus's posture towards this miracle that we don't see in the others? So in the first 2 miracles, Jesus' mom asks him, will you turn water into wine? And Jesus is hesitant. The next miracle, this royal official comes to Jesus and says, will you heal my son? And he rebukes him. How does this differ from those 2?
He's actually approaching someone.
Yeah.
And that's not been it's not asking him.
Right.
And so it's something that he is, it's almost, to me, it's like this was his first miracle that he was going in for, is that like he wasn't relying on somebody else's faith.
Right.
Because this is a man that like knew of Jesus, but didn't seem to have the faith in him as what the
we'll see throughout the passage. The man seems to show no semblance of faith whatsoever. And so there's like, Jesus is making a statement here with this healing. Like this, there's a miracle, and Jesus has intentionally sought it out. He's intentionally picked this man as opposed to anyone else that might be gathered there. And he's performed a healing. And as we go, let's read the next few verses here. And why don't you read 7, 8, and 9? And if there's a question that comes up, otherwise I want to jump into a detail there.
Okay. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am still trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked.
Okay.
The day on which this took place was the Sabbath.
Okay. So is there anything that sticks out about the statement that Jesus is making here from those passages? Or maybe some of Jesus' intention?
Well, like I said, again, it wasn't necessarily on the faith of the man.
Yeah.
The Sabbath was probably the biggest statement.
Yeah, so there's this detail that, again, John includes these details that are like, huh. And so there's this detail here that John wants us to be sure that we know this healing took place on the Sabbath. And there's actually a connecting point there that's really important that flew right over my head, and I think would fly over any of our heads that are not, thoroughly versed in the Pharisaical laws. But Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And it's the Sabbath day. And so this next verse is going to be really important. So read that verse 10, because that's going to clarify how these 2 pieces are connected.
And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, is it the Sabbath?
It is the Sabbath.
It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. Oh.
So basically what the Pharisees did that rubbed Jesus the wrong way, and we see it throughout, is the Pharisees would take these the laws of Moses or laws of the Old Testament that are recorded in Scripture and are the divine words of God that are somewhat nebulous, and then they would clarify them so that it was completely certain and clear.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they would take the Mosaic Law and the Ten Commandments that says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Mm-hmm.
Thou shalt not work on the Sabbath. Now that, again, it can be interpreted a million different ways. Like, what does it mean to remember the Sabbath day? What does it mean to keep it holy? What does it mean not to work? Well, in the religious tradition of the ancient Jewish culture, they would create very specific laws and rules that would clarify those things. And one of those laws was that thou shalt not carry a mat on the Sabbath day, or there would be a threat of punishment by stoning or death. So what I find so interesting is Jesus has sought this miracle out. This man hasn't come to him. He's done it specifically on the Sabbath day, and he has commanded the man, in order to be healed, to break one of the very specific laws of the religious leaders of that day.
Yeah.
Right? There's this really interesting thing that's happening there.
So maybe part of the miracle was for the crowd as much as the first thing that I noticed is that the religious leaders didn't even address the miracle.
Yeah.
Didn't even say,
that's crazy.
Oh my gosh, he's walking.
And these are religious leaders that probably have prayed over him at some point. They're certainly familiar. There's a small community, like 38 years he's been paralyzed.
Yeah.
And they're just like, don't even pay any attention to that. You're carrying a mat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy to think that they've just kind of glossed over that. But then it's understandable, knowing now what we know is that they were starting to build this case against Jesus. So that was one of their, first.
But even there, they don't know it's Jesus yet. Because we find out that they ask who it is, and the verse says, and he doesn't know, and they don't do anything yet. So it's like they're just literally seeing that he's breaking a rule, and that's not allowed, and that trumps being miraculously healed of 38 years of paralysis. And to me, it's just it's so easy to point fingers and condemn that and be like, that is crazy, but I think what it's pointing out, what Jesus is intentionally pointing out, is they have lost the perspective of the intent of the law. The law of Moses was never meant to be a law that was restrictive and hurtful and punitive, right? It wasn't this angry God that was giving them a bunch of rules that didn't make sense, and if they didn't follow them, then they would be put to death. Instead, they were laws that were meant to produce life. And so what was the Sabbath? The Sabbath is inviting this pause, this reconnection relationship. We talked about this past spring, where the Ten Commandments are similar to wedding vows that God is offering to his people, where it's be in connection, pause, be together, rest, and take that space so that you can have fullness of life. And then we've twisted them so that they're a little bit clearer. It's a little bit easier to follow. And I think we're still pursuing wholeheartedly certainty in so many areas of our life. It's I need to know who's right. I need to know who's wrong. I need to know what side of the line you fall on, whether that's in our politics, whether that's in the way that we engage with one another in social settings, whether that's how we engage in the church and those different rules and regulations that we hold. There's this sense that if I don't get everything right, then I'm going to be wrong. Then I'm going to be punished. Then I'm going to experience condemnation from God. And this is this wake-up call from Jesus that's saying, it is so much worse that you get caught in that pursuit of certainty than it is for you to carry a mat after being healed of 38 years. So Jesus is seeing individuals and people through a lens of their transformation. And the Pharisees, and I think you and I, are seeing people through a lens of our legalism.
Right.
Of what about them doesn't fit?
Yeah.
And how do we clean that up so that they can fit?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, so Phil says this thing about being remembered is the word remember is remembered.
Yeah.
Being remembered to Christ.
Yes.
And so that thought of
dismembered versus remembered.
Right.
Yeah.
So the thought of remembering the Sabbath is the Sabbath was not supposed to be a legalistic view of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. It's supposed to bring you back to your relationship with Christ and making sure that you rest. And so yeah, and like you said, I think we all do that. We tend to look at others and what they're doing and feeling like, well, they're not doing it the way they're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah.
And we tend to get to the
And in
point.
doing so, we dismember
Right. Yeah.
people from the body. You know, I think about like every day when I get home from work and the boys are excited, and what do? We like go wrestle in the bonus room, right? It's this remembering, it's this reconnecting with one another that's silly and fun and lighthearted, but it connects us in relationship. And like when we put those rules and regulations in, it is separating, it's dismembering. Or when we put those rules and regulations in aside from their intent, we don't remember what we're trying to do here, that can create that barrier. And that's certainly what happens here. Yeah. Well, let's continue, because I think his response is going to be really interesting. So read, so in 11 or in 12 and 13, they basically say, who was it? And the man says he doesn't know. And Jesus slips away in the crowd. So they don't know. Read 14 and 15. What sticks out to you about the man's response, or what questions do you have about the man's response?
Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse will happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. Something worse will happen to you?
Yeah. So first there's this like weird part that happens with like Jesus and talking about sin.
Yeah.
I think this comes across as threatening. I don't think that's what it is.
Like at first I read it that way, as like a threat. But then now that I think about it, like being paralyzed pales in comparison to a loss of eternity.
Yeah.
And so like if you don't know Jesus, if you don't know who Jesus is, then you lose a life of eternity here on earth, but then and you know a life with Jesus here on earth, but also in eternity. So that is way worse.
Well, and also I think there's this feeling too where we shorten the time frame. So like something has happened in between Jesus' healing and now they're bumping into each other at the temple, right? And we read that as like instantly happening. Yeah. But John, it's interesting. John, throughout the passages up into this chapter, has said 1 day later, 2 days later. And then now it says sometime later, and then later. And so maybe some time has passed here. And I think Jesus is looking at him and saying, man, I healed you and you didn't know what to do with that healing. And you like started indulging in the things of the world. And so I want to tell you, like, be careful. Yeah. Because it's going to, like you said, it's going to lead you into a worse place. Like that will make you wish that you were, you know, again, like an eternity away from God is, you know, so much more painful than disease and sickness that you might have. And so I almost see it as like, you know, when the advice given to a 19-year-old that signs a professional contract to go and get $10 million to go play, you know, basketball or something. Right. Yeah. And it's like, hey, don't spend it all because you're gonna be in a worse position if you spend it all than that. But what I find so interesting, so this man apparently has taken God's grace and he's leveraged it to then go out and pursue the indulgences of the world. He's living in this sin where Jesus is going to confront him in that. And then immediately the man, instead of choosing to follow Jesus, goes where? Goes to the religious leaders that condemned him. And there's this sense, and I feel this, is like there's a safety in the knowable structures of certainty of this world. Where it's like, even if we've seen the grace of God, even if we've encountered that, there's still this space that's like, but what if I'm wrong? And wouldn't it be easier just to follow the rules and check the boxes and look like everybody else? And I think Jesus is calling out that distinction here in the story. And he's going to say here in verse 24, and we'll kind of end with that, in his defense, because now that he has been identified to the religious leaders, they come and they challenge him. And this one verse that Jesus says is, "Very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life." And I'm struck by this reality that the paralyzed man experiences the freedom of God that can invite him into this fullness of abundant life Instead, he uses that freedom to pursue the things of the world. And when he's challenged on that pursuit, he's looking at these two spaces of new life with God that's uncertain, or fitting in with the structures of the world that is certain. And he feels more comfortable in the things of the world. And I feel like Jesus is calling us to do the same thing here, is to say, have you felt paralyzed by the world around you, paralyzed by religion, paralyzed by indulgences? Have you placed all of your life in these hopes of things that will bring you happiness, and they've failed, whether it be wealth or popularity or love or religion? And if you're exhausted by that and you hear this word, believe in me and I'll give you eternal life. Yeah. Not in the future, right now. You will cross over from death into life. And so I think it's neat that this passage falls right before our baptism Sunday, because that's exactly what we're inviting folks to do, is to take that step from death into life, to claim an uncertain and yet beautiful relationship with Jesus by denying the allures of the world, but also the restrictions of religion, and enter into something that is messy but good.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, hopefully you'll be able to just dive into this passage this week. And if you're feeling the call to be baptized, I hope that you'll see us on Sunday, and just come out and celebrate those that are being baptized with us on August 3rd.
Yeah,
out at
we
Lake
won't be
Kamak.
at the church.
That's right.
So don't show up here. We'll see you at the lake.
See you then. Bye.